Welcome to the next lecture. After building the header in the last lecture, let's build the features section right now. So this is the nice clean features section we'll build based on my sketch. Just a nice heading, some text, and then the features explained in 4 columns. This should not be so hard, right? So in this lecture, we'll learn some new things. We'll learn how to put content on a website directly from CSS with the after pseudo class. We'll use the fluid grid for the first time in order to build the 4 futures column. And we'll also use beautiful icons in those columns as well. So let's go. So this is where we left our project after the last lecture. The header is all built. Now it's time to start adding the first section, and in HTML we actually have an element for that, which is called section. And this is just like the header, it's a container so that we can tell this is a section. So I'll call this section features. And now let's start with the title and with the paragraph. We'll put that in a row. So class row, because of course we want this centered. And now let's put a heading here. Now each web page should only have one H1 element, which means only one main heading. We already used that main heading here, and so for now in each of the sections we will put an H2 title. Let's see what content we have for this section, and here it is. I will copy all of it actually and put it down here, such as I did the last time. Now, I already showed you how to make comments in CSS. Now I will tell you the same thing for HTML, and it's very easy. Just like this. You see everything turned gray here, and now to close it, it's just like this. And now this is a comment, and it will not appear anywhere. And I can just leave it here until we use all of this text. So the title here is this one. It is right here. Okay. Get food fast, not fast food. Okay, instead of this, I actually want an larger dash. That's called an M dash. And in HTML, we have a thing called HTML special characters or special entities. And to write those, we start with an ampersand. And in this case, I already know how it's called. It's M dash. So instead of writing that dash, I write this HTML code. And you can find lots of tables on the internet about this. And I will also include a link in the course ebook where you can find lots of HTML entities. Alright, this is for the heading. And now let's add the text as well in form of a paragraph. And of course we need a class name here, and I will call this long copy because it's a long paragraph with lots of text, and copy stands for copyright, which is like the text for websites. So in this paragraph we'll put this text here. We'll actually delete all the text we already used. So put this text right here. As we did with the header, I will start by building the HTML, and the CSS will be then used to format all of this. And now let's start using the grid like a pro. And in order to do that, we have to start a new row. Just close this. And now inside of this row, we make a div for each column. Div class again. Now each column needs the call class. And this comes here from the grid CSS file. So we don't have to worry about this. We just use this call class. So each each column needs a call class. Now we have 4 columns. So each of those 4 columns will have this class, span 1 of 4. And again, we can check this here in the grid file, grid of 3 and grid of 4. So each of our columns will have a width of 23.8%. Alright, back here. So let's put some more text here. I think that these things here are like titles of each of the features. So let's make another heading element with these. We already used H1, H2, and now it's time for H3. Alright. And now the text below this, and again in a paragraph. I'm not going to worry about the icons for now. The icons will also go inside of this column, but I will just leave this for the end because we so far have not talked about it. So now I will just copy this 3 times and then fill this with our text. It's kind of boring, I guess. You will see that part of your work will always be copy and paste, and you probably will get used to it. And the last thing, right here. Okay, that's it with text. So we already used all the text. From here, I will save this, and now let's see how it looks like in the browser. It's down here. Alright, not so cool, right? What's missing here are our icons. So let's fix that, and we will use a beautiful icon font called Ion Icons. Here it is. So Ion Icons. Don't worry, this link is once again in the course ebook. And we will start by downloading it to our computer. So it takes some time. And here we have it. Right inside our folder. And let's extract it. And what do we have here? We have a bunch of files, but we actually only need 2 things. We need these CSS files and these font files. We actually need this Ion Icons minify CSS. We will paste this inside our vendors folder CSS, because you already know it's a file that we got from the internet. And then the fonts, because it's an icon font. This also comes with the icons in form of images, but we want the fonts. So let's copy this entire folder Windows. Okay, there already was a folder here, so I will replace this. And this is our icon font here. And now, how do we use this? I actually shouldn't have closed that. Icons, because this is where we will choose our icons. Alright, but first I will show you how we use it. So we want them right here, even before the heading. So we just write E class and then the name, close this, and then the name of an icon. For instance, imagine that we want this heart. We just need to copy the name of this class, paste it here, and then we'll have a nice little heart. Want to see? Well, of course not, because we didn't include the CSS file yet. So let's do that. I'll hit Command D to duplicate this. And alright, here it is, Ion Icons CSS. But now it will work. And here it is. Here is our heart. It's not where I wanted it. Let me go back. Of course not. I don't want it in this place. I want it here right before the H3. So let me paste it here. And now I have this icon right here. So, but that's not the icon that I want for this feature here. So let's choose just another one. So up to 365 days per year. Well, which of these could look good for that? Well, these are a lot, really a lot. You will need some time to go through all of them. And I choose to go with these icons here. These are iOS inspired, which you can see from the name. And I really like those line icons. So I will choose all icons of this class so that we have some consistency here. And this looks great for the first feature, I think, because it's the infinity symbol and 365 days per year is kind of an infinity. So the next one is ready in 20 minutes, and we could use kind of a watch for that, like this one here. So copy it, paste it here. So I class, paste and close it. And the next one is 100% organic. So let me see what we have for that. But first let's check if they're showing up here. Okay, they are. Cool. Now let me choose another one for the 100% organic. And I'm going with this little carrot here. So let me just write it here. I class, and last but not least, we have the order anything feature, and that could be like a shopping cart. Let's see if we find one. Here we go. Copy and paste. Alright, so this is our HTML. In the next lecture, we will format this so that it looks professionally designed. So don't wait, come with me to the next lecture. Let's continue to build our future section. So the first thing that we're going to do with this is whitespace. You surely remember that whitespace is a very important thing, and so let's define whitespace between sections for all sections at the same time. So let's format the section, and I will do it here right in the reusable components part of our code, and we will put that white space between the sections using padding. Now you maybe say that to put a space between elements we use margin, and that's actually right, but I will use padding because I will later have I'm planning to have some sections with background colors, and in order to preserve that background color we need to make sure that the space is inside of each of the boxes. You will see that later. So I want a lot of white space, so let me say 80 pixels at the top and on the bottom. 0. So 0 at left and right, so no margin. Great, so this is a lot of white space. And it looks great, right? So the next thing is to format the H2 heading here. So I want the H2 heading to look quite similar to the H1. For example, I want it to have the same text transform, the same letter spacing, and the same font weight. So what do I do in order to achieve that? I just group the similar properties just as I showed you before. So H1 and H2 will have some things in common. H1 and H2. So this is for H1 only. This is for H1 only. And this as well. And also this. But the rest we can leave here for both. Now on H2 I want another font size. Not so big, of course. And I will say maybe 180%, so it's not so big. And maybe a word spacing of 2 pixels. And I also want to align it on the web page inside of the row. So I will make I will make text align center. Yeah, that looks much better than before. Now let's put some space between this. So again we use some margin at the bottom. 30 pixels should be a good value for this. And now I want some nice little yellow line between the H2 and the text. And as I told you in the first lecture, we will learn to put some content on a website just with CSS. So we do that using the after pseudo class. So after is just some stuff that will appear after the H2, such as the name indicates. And now we can style this just as if it was a normal element. We can say we want it to display as a block element, and we want a height of 2 pixels, so it will be a nice little line with 2 pixels height. And we want it to be orange, And you already know where to find that orange. It's up here. Paste it here. And now, a very important thing, whenever we do a after pseudo class, we have to specify its content. And in this case, we don't want any words to appear. So we put a space in there. Now the width of that line, of that box, will be 100 pixels. And alright, let's see how that looks. So some things is not right here because we want it centered. And of course, the reason for that is that we have to say that we want it centered. And we do that such as we did before. So we say we want the margin 0 and bottom 0 and left and right auto. And now this should work. And also we need to specify some margin between this and the bottom of 30 pixels as well, such as we have it here. So let's take a look at this. Alright, but we still don't have the margin that we want. And yeah, the reason is because this has to be margin top. So there's a margin between the H2 after, so this block, and the actual H2, and then 30 pixels after that orange block we inserted. And this is exactly what we want. Now next up we have this text here. So let's define a nice paragraph style for this. So this can also go here into the reusable components. That will make a little subsection here for paragraphs. So this is called long copy. And one thing we will do is to change the line height, which is one thing that we learned in the typography lecture. So line height should be between 120 and 145%, and I will actually use the highest of the values because I really like some line height. Now one thing that you notice is that this line is very long, because another rule of typography was that this line should have at most like 2 complete alphabets, and this is way more. So let's make this paragraph a little less wide. So I will say that the width of this paragraph should be 70%. Now the problem is that it will no longer be centered. So a good idea for this problem is that instead of trying to centering it, is to do another thing, which is this. We say that the margin left should be 15%. And why 15? Because the total width would be 100%. So if we want to center it, the remaining 30% should be distributed to both sides. So 15% left, 15% right, plus the 70%, which is our width, makes 100%. Okay? So let's see what it looks like. Okay, and this is way better now. Maybe you already noticed that sometimes I have to scroll the web page a little bit in order to make our changes appear here. And I actually have no idea why this happens. It must be something with the connection between brackets and the browser. So don't worry. Maybe if you also experience this, just scroll your website a little bit and then the change will appear. Now the next thing is to format these boxes. And the first thing I notice immediately is that these columns are a little too close to each other. So I should give them some some padding here, like for example 1% padding. So let's go back to CSS, and now how should we do this? So we should never ever change anything of these classes which come from our grid. So what we can do here is to add another class and then format that class, and I will call it box, because not here, because it's like a box where all the features go. And I will actually reuse this box probably later, so let me just put it here. I will call it box, and I just want to have it a padding of 1%. Alright, and that looks a little bit better now. Now these H3 elements here, they should be similar to this one, but a little smaller. So I do all the heading elements look similar, so that we maintain like a similar style all throughout the web page. So I want these three attributes to be always the same in all these three headings. And for the H3 ones in specific, it should also be a little bigger than the normal font size, but only slightly bigger. So maybe 100%, sorry, and 110% should be fine. And then also some space between the H3 and the paragraph. So let me say margin bottom, for instance, 15 pixels. Alright. Now I really don't like that this text doesn't fit in one line. So what can we do about that? Let's go back, and maybe the reason for that is this letter spacing. So if we take that away from the H3, and I do this by pasting it here in the H1 and in the H2 headings, we will see, so now the H3 no longer has the letter spacing. So let's see what happens. Okay, now it fits just as we wanted it. So this is much better. Now as for the text in here, I think this is a little too big actually. It looks a bit overwhelming, don't you think so? So what we can do here is to make the text a little bit smaller and raise its line height. So we didn't give it any name because maybe we don't need to, because you can see here that it's a simple paragraph inside of the box. So you already can guess what I'm gonna do now, right? So I'm writing box, and then I'm selecting all the paragraphs inside a box. Very easy. So as I said, a smaller font size. I will choose 90% here, and again I'm going with a line height of 145%. That should look much better. So I think it's way more pleasant to look at. And the section already looks great, don't you think so? The only thing that we need to do now is to change these icons. So let's do that. And in order to do that, I will actually define a new class for all those icons, and I will call this icon big, because we will use some other icons down the road and they will probably not be as big as these, so let's just call these icons big icons. Makes sense, right? So I can just say I want paragraphs, here I want some icons. So you see, I'm really worried with keeping this code organized, and you will see when you have bigger projects this becomes incredibly important. So in order to make you get used to this is why I'm doing this. So let's define the icon big class, and as you know, this is an icon font, so it's really a font. So we can set its font size, for instance, and I will make it really big. I will start with 400%, and if it's too big we can always reduce that. And I also want this icon to display as a block, display block, so that it forces a line break, as you already know. I want it to be orange, so again, as if it was a real font, we can set its color, because color really means font color. So I will again copy this orange color that we're already used to and put it right here. And maybe a little margin between the icon and the heading. So margin bottom, of course, and let's say 10 pixels. And okay, I think we can see how this looks like. Okay, great. Well, the icons are probably a little too big, right? So I think, well, maybe 350%. And let's check it again. Yeah, that's better. So this is really designing in the browser. That's what I meant when I told you what designing in the browser was all about. It's trying, tweaking the CSS code and see what looks best and what works best in order to make our website as good as we can. So I think this section is ready. It looks great, right? And see you in the next section. Hi there! Let's build the third section of our website, the favorite meals section. For this section, we will use beautiful photography and a nice transition effect to show the favorite meals of OmniFood's users. I planned this section like you can see on that sketch that I did on the left side, and on the right side we see how it will look like. Notice that this section has no title and uses 100% of the browser's width, so no row class here. I choose this design so that those beautiful images have a bigger impact. In this lecture, you will learn how to make a grid of beautiful images and how to make a nice zoom in transition just using CSS. This is really powerful CSS3 stuff. And we'll also learn a way to make IMG elements darker. It's all super easy and fun. So, back to our HTML file. Now, how are we going to build this grid? First of all, we need to make a new section. So, section, and again I will call this section, and this time it's meals. Now, we want 2 rows with 4 images in each row. As I said before, we will not use the row class here because we don't want a centered row with some images. No, we want the images to occupy 100% of the browser's width. And it is actually a good practice to use an unordered list to do that. In fact, 2 unordered lists. We will use one for each line. just as I did in the navigation. It's better to put some stuff in unordered lists, for example those 4 links in the navigation or these images that we're going to use now, than to throw the images onto that website. So this is what we're going to do now. Well, class, and I will call this meals showcase. Alright, and you remember it, we will have that li element inside of that. And now inside of this list we can put anything we want. In the navigation we put links in here. Now we will see a new HTML element called figure. And figure is also like a container which can contain a image and also a caption for that image. In this case we will only put an image inside of this container and no caption, because I don't want to make things all too complicated here. But just so you know, there is an element called fig caption, and you can use that to put some caption in here. So image, as you remember, we have to specify the source attribute. And now where is our image? It is probably in resources and then image. And now let's better check what's inside of that folder so that we're completely sure. So resources, images, and yeah, you see here these are our meals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is the order of the images. And actually in the text file we have the name of the meals, and we can put those names in the alt description of the image, right? So here we just want this image. Let me paste those names here again with a comment as I showed you before, and close this comment. Okay, so this is the alternative text, as you already know, in case that the image cannot be displayed for some reason. And that's it. So I will copy this 3 more times so that we have 4 images here. So this is number 2, number 3, and number 4. And just copy these alt texts. Chicken breast, steak, and autumn pumpkin soup. Wow, this sounds really good. Makes you feel hungry, right? Okay, this is the first 4 images, the first row of images, and now the second row. So we will format all of this in a second in CSS, don't worry. And number 6, number 7, and number 8. And now the descriptions. So it's really important that you fill out this alt attribute in order to make your websites valid HTML. We will see later in the course how we can check if we actually have valid or invalid HTML code. So this is really important. All right. So let's see what it looks like on our web page. So of course these images are so big and look nothing like we want so far. We're gonna fix that with CSS right now. All right. So remember, this is called Meals Showcase. I will just copy this so you don't have to write it all again. So Meals Showcase. Let me copy this. Again, I'm really worried about the structure here. So this is the meals. All right. So as before, since this is a list and we don't want that bullet points, we say list style none. And another thing, since we want this to be the entire browser width, I will say with 100%. So I hope you're already getting familiar with all of that and that you can follow exactly what I'm doing here. Now the next thing is to format the li elements inside of the unordered list. So meals, showcase, and li, as we already know. So we want to display them as a block. So you see this display property here is a really important one. I'm using it all the time, and you will too once you develop your first websites. And the next thing is that I want to float these elements to the left. So instead of showing one after one, I want them side by side. And another very important thing is their width. So I'm having a list with 100% width, and I want 4 elements inside of this to show side by side with the full width. So I have 4 li elements, and therefore each of them has to be 25% wide, right? Because 4 times 25 makes the 100%. Okay. Now let me just do one thing here, and let me give this figure element a class. I will call this meal photo, and I will do this with all of these 8 figures. And 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, what I want to do now is to format these. So it's meal photo. And what I got to do now is to say this, width 100%. Now saying that this element with the class meal photo has a width of 100% means just that it has the exact width of its parent, which is meal showcase li. And we have also to say that it has a margin 0. I know that we already did this in the beginning here. It's maybe what you're wondering. But as with the h1 element, this normalized file defines some margin for that element, and so we have to override that specifically. And now I need to format the actual photo, the actual image inside of the photo container. And the most important thing I have to do is again width equals 100%. And this will do exactly the same thing as before. It will assure that the image is exactly as wide as its container, which is this element. And the height will then be set automatically. So what does it look like? Alright, this is exactly what we want, right? So this looks great. The images are already here, but we're not quite done with this because, as I said in the introduction of this lecture, we want to add some cool transitions here. And that's what we're going to do in part 2 of building the meals section. See you there! Hello back and welcome to part 2 of building the favorite meals section. Let's go straight back into brackets. So let's continue formatting this section. Now the first thing we notice, and that we didn't correct yet, is this large distance between these two sections, which doesn't look natural. And that's because this section, like the other section as well, has a big padding, which goes like until here. We actually don't want this section to have padding because it's a different section. It doesn't have a title and everything, so we don't want this section to have a padding like that. So let's quickly correct that. So this section is called section, I honestly don't remember, meals, of course. So section meals, I will say padding 0, and that should solve the problem. Yeah, so this looks much better. And next we will do that animation I was telling you about. Now what this animation is all about is that when we hover one of the images, the image kind of zooms out and also gets lighter. So we want to make the image dark and zoom in so that when we hover the image can zoom out and get brighter. Once I see this, you will get the idea. So we can use a powerful CSS3 property, which is transform. We actually already used that before, and now we're going to use it again. So in this case, we will scale the image. In fact, all of the images. We will scale them to like 1/15. And this means that the image will be, instead of 100%, it will be 115% big. So let's see this in practice. So these images have grown. They are bigger than they are supposed to be, and you see they even go out of the browser width. It's even bigger than the browser now, and we will fix that in a moment, because we don't want these images to be bigger than their container, which is meal photo. So right now the image kind of overflows its container. So what can we do about this? There's a nice little property called overflow, and when we set it to hidden, then that overflow will not be visible, and we just see the part of the image which is still inside of the container. So let's see. Alright, so this is exactly what we want. And now what we want is to change that transform property when we hover the image, right? So let's do exactly that. And maybe you already see where this is going. So what I'm doing now is meal photo image, and now we can also use this hover state for everything. This doesn't work only for links, even if we only use it for links until now, but it works really with every element. And so what do we want to happen? We want this transform to go back to normal, right? So we scale it to 1. Let's see if this works and if you get the idea. So this is what happens. Don't worry, we will put an animation there in a moment, but this is what happens. And you see there was actually like a white little line down there, and I actually can't tell you why that happens, but I know a good solution to that. So instead of scaling it until 1, I'm just going to scale it to 1.03, and this should solve the problem. And also I want to, of course, animate this transformation. So how can I do it? I say transition and then transform, and let's say half a second, 0.5 seconds. And this should already do the job. So this is exactly the same thing as we did with our links here, right? We defined the transition with the interval, and then with the hover state we said what would happen. So this is what we did right here. So let's check it out. Okay, this is very nice, right? This is really, really cool. Don't you think so? It's a beautiful effect. But we will go even further than this. So as I said in the beginning, we will make this image darker, and then as we hover it, we'll make it lighter. And that's quite easy to do. As we built the header, we learned how to make a background image darker, which was our hero image, right? And now let's try to make this image darker. And let me show you how we're going to do that. So if we set the opacity, yet another CSS property, you see you're using a lot of properties here. I mean, I'm covering almost everything that you need to know with just this website. So opacity 0.7, so this is 70%. And okay, just to show you, let me show you what this looks like. So this is kind of white now, and it's white because its background is white. So if we want to make this darker, we just put the background of this image to black, 0, 0, 0. So behind that image we now have a black container, and since this image is now opaque, it will get darker. Very well. This looks really great, right? And now we just have to animate the opacity here. So when we hover, we also want the opacity to change back to 1, which is 100%. And in order to animate it, we put it right here. So opacity 0.5 seconds. And now we should see both of the things animated. And here we go. Wow, this is really exciting, right? This looks so great. Let's see how simple this was. So I think the section is also done here. Another thing that I noticed when I was revisiting this section here was that we maybe need some space between this paragraph here and these columns. So what I'm going to do is to add some bottom margin to this paragraph. So it's, if you remember, it's the long copy class, and I will again make a little section here for that called futures. All right, because where is it? So it's this class, but I don't want to make a margin to all long copy class element that we will use throughout the website. So again, I'm using the long copy inside of the section futures. So let me just copy this. See, this is a very usual practice. You see section futures and then the long copy which is inside of that, and then we just specify its margin bottom and set it to 40 pixels. And now this looks much better, right? Okay, probably 40 was a little too much. Again, this is really designing in the browser, and it's really great. Yeah, this looks cool now. Don't you think so? So let me revisit the whole thing. We designed this section, everything beautiful. Then we did this section, and now we even have this powerful transition stuff. Wow, we've learned such a lot so far. A lot of CSS properties, and you should probably take note of them or copy them somewhere so that you have a whole list of things that you can do with CSS. So that's it for now, and maybe you want to take a break now, or you can just join me in the next lecture where we will design our next section. So see you there, and bye. Welcome back to this project. I'm really glad that you're still with me on this amazing journey, and I hope that you're enjoying this course so far. You see this at the end of every lecture, but I still want to tell you again that it's so important that you ask your questions in the course forums, if you have any, of course. Because interacting with other students or with me is the best way to learn and to succeed. So now let's move on to the next section. This one is the How It Works section. This is how I pictured the section where we explain how ordering food works, with the app screen on the left side and the 3 simple steps on the right side. Very simple, but efficient in showing potential customers how OmniFood works. In this lecture, we'll use a lot of the techniques that you're already familiar with. We'll also learn how to draw circles with CSS, a cool technique to make separations between sections, and how to incorporate buttons for the App Store and the Play Store. Who knows, maybe one day you'll make a website for an app. So as always, we start by adding a new section. Right here after the last one. So section, and I'm gonna call this one section steps. Alright. This section will have a title such as the second section that we designed. So div, class, and so we need a row now in order to center. As you hopefully remember, a H2 element where we will put the heading for our sections. And now we gotta know what text to put here. So let's get back to our content file. And here it is. I'm gonna copy all of it, as always, and put it down here. So the title is this one. Paste it here. And just as the last time, this will be an M dash. Alright, simple as that. Now in this case, we don't have a paragraph after this, and we'll start with showing the iPhone and the app on the left side, and on the right side the 3 steps. So this time we have 2 columns and not 4. So again, I need to start a new row. So class row. Now we have, as I said, two columns. So as always, a column needs the call class. It's a span 1 of 2, because we will have two columns. And in the first column, we want our iPhone with a screenshot on it. So it's an image, of course, and we already know it's very easy to build an image on our site. This resources folder and image folder. Now let's see where it is. App iPhone, I guess. And we also need an alternative text, which can be OmniFood app on iPhone. Okay. And let me just give this a class called maybe app screen. Alright. So this is the left column here. And now as for the right column, let me just put another column here. And again a span 1 of 2. Is to actually start with 3 containers, which will then contain the number of the step and the corresponding text. So this will call works step. So step of how the works section. Alright. Now the number itself will also be a div element. We don't need a class name here for now. So we will then make this div round. Then for the text, as usual, we will put the text inside a paragraph. And the text is down here. Alright. Now I will just copy this and paste this down here 2 times, because I don't feel like writing it all again. And then just copy the actual text right into these paragraphs. And the third step. So we don't need this anymore. Now all that's left to put here are those buttons for the App Store. So we also want them inside of this column here. So we can put them right after those 3 steps. So some space here, and we will take care of the formatting later in CSS. So the buttons are very simple. It's just a link, as you could have imagined, and again which points nowhere, and with a class which I will call button app. And now instead of putting some text here, we will put an image, and then that image will serve as the button. So img source. And we actually already have those images in our folder, but they're really easy to get from the internet. For instance, the button for the App Store, you can just get it from the Apple website. So in the resources folder, image, and then it should be down here somewhere. So it's download app. Let's see if that's right. Yeah. Now we need an alternative text here as well. This is App Store button. Okay, and that's it actually. That's all it takes. Now I will duplicate this with Command D. And down here just change it. It is app Android. And then here it's Play Store. And that's all it takes. So this is the content of our How It Works section. So let's save this and go to our browser. And here it is. Unformatted, as you can see. So the title already looks nice because we already formatted it before. And we have those two columns here that we defined and our two buttons. And now we need to go back to CSS and style the whole thing. So let's do that. Hi there. This is part 2 of building the How It Works section. And this is what we're gonna format in this lecture. So let's start with these two step boxes and of course make this image here smaller. Okay, so right back to the CSS file. Let me grab a copy of this and how it works. So I'll start with the steps box because as you remember, those are the two boxes, the left one and the right one. Okay, so let's first put a margin between them and the H2 title. So margin top of, let's say, 30 pixels. And now we need to select each of the boxes individually. And in order to do that, I will show you a new, very useful selector. And it's this one. It's actually a pseudo class, and it's this one, first child. So this will select the first of the step boxes, which is in our case the left one. And there's also a similar one, which is the last child. So these are two very useful pseudo classes. And actually in the course ebook you can find a link to an article which has, I think, 30 very useful selectors, such as this one. Alright, so in the first box we want the text aligned to be to the right side. Now you may ask, we don't have any text there. And that's actually right. But the text align property doesn't work only for text. It actually does work for all inline or inline block elements, and the image is one of those inline block elements, and so it will then be aligned to the right side of this box. And I also want to add a padding to the right side of 3%. And now you maybe feel a little confused why I'm adding this padding with a percentage instead of adding pixels. And there's a simple reason for that, and it has to do with responsive web design, where we want our layout to be fluid. And as I explained to you before, fluid means that we have all our layout properties defined in percentages instead of rigid pixels. So let's do the same thing with the other box, and here we will say that we want a padding to the left side of 3% as well. And now let's check what else we have. So the image, I want the image, and it's called app screen. So we already have a class name here. So let's say app screen, and let's say width of let's say 40%. And again, I'm defining the width with a percentage of the box. So let's see what it looks like now. Alright, this looks quite good, right? So you have a nice distance between the image and the text, and I think the image size is okay now. So the next thing is we want to format those numbers here. As you remember, we want this to be a circle with a number inside of this circle. And we also want some distance, some space, of course, between each of these work steps elements. So let's start doing this. Works step and margin to the bottom, I would say 50 pixels. And again, let's check our HTML file. So we want to select the div element inside of a work steps, because that will be our number. So works step div. And what are we going to do? First, let's set its color to orange. And we already know where that is. It's up here. Then we also want a border, and I will use 2 pixels here, such as in other elements on a website, so to keep some consistency here, and here with the same color as well. And I want to display it as an inline box, so this very much used property display, and I want the inline box because that way we can ensure that the element doesn't force a line break, and so the number can be side by side with the text. So let's just check that out. Okay, great. So we have some distance here now, and so now let's continue formatting this. It's now a square and we want it to be a circle, and you probably remember how to do it. That's border radius 50%. And we can now define the height of that element, let's say 50 pixel, and the width. Of course, if we want it to be a circle, it has to be as high as it's wide. And inside of this box, the number should be centered. So text align center. So let's check this out. Alright, it's already circular. We will now increase the font size of this and give it some padding. So you see, this is now really designing in the browser. One thing is that's also left to do is to make this text appear here on the side, and in order to do that we need to define a float property for that element. So some padding, as I said, I would say like 5 pixel, and then let's make it float to the left. So you see we have a whole lot of properties here for this little element. Another thing is the font size. Let's say 150%. Alright. Okay, this looks already quite good, right? Now what I would do now is to define some margin to the right here and maybe increase the size of those circles. So a margin to the left of 25 pixels, and then increase this here to, let's say, 54 or 55 actually. It doesn't really matter for 1 pixel. Okay, this is obviously margin to the right, not to the left. Okay, so this looks cool. Now we probably should add some more space between this and here the H2 element, because it doesn't look quite aligned right now. We want the phone to be more aligned with this text here. And so let's increase the margin for this box on the right side. So we already defined that there's a margin top 30, but we actually want this second box to have a larger margin. So let's say maybe 70 pixels. And so we can cut this and put it here. So the first one will have 30 and the second one will have 70 pixels. And so I don't need this one anymore. And alright. Great. And now one thing left to do is to format these buttons here. We want them, of course, to be the same size, and this one is way too big. So let's do that as well. We can just say, well, I better check the HTML because I don't remember exactly. Okay, so we have the button app, and now we want to style the image inside of the button app class. So button app img, and we want to set a height for them, let's say 50 pixels, so that they look the same. So the width is then defined automatically, of course, and let's say a margin between them. So I'll set a margin to the right side of 10 pixels. And let's check that out. Great, now they look quite similar. Now it's time to add some margin here, so that these two are not so close to the text. We want them to be more like here at the bottom of the phone. So in order to do that, I will actually show you a new selector, because what I want to do here is to add a space to the last work steps. So I'll do that here, and I'll say works step, and then I say last of type. This is quite similar to last child, but so in order that you get to know last of type as well, I'll show you this too. So now I say that I want a larger margin here to the bottom, and in this case I will say 80 pixels instead of those 50. So the work steps all have 50 pixels, but now I say that the last one will have 80 pixels. Okay, right. For now this looks very good, don't you think so? But there is, however, a problem now, which is this. You see that even though we defined that a section should have 80% padding, there seems to be no padding here between this section and this one, right? And there is actually a good reason for that, and I will use the Chrome developer tools to show you that. So let's start by inspecting this element. And it's right here. So the section steps, which is the selected one, is the blue one, and we will see that the section starts right here. So the steps section starts where the meals section should start. And you actually see the green area is those 80 pixels padding, and it starts at a weird place, right? But there is actually a good reason for that, and it has to do with clearing the floats. Maybe you remember that from the introductory lectures, where I told you that when you define some floats, you then later have to clear those floats, and we didn't do any of those here. So the section meals actually has, as you can see up there, 0 pixels height, and that's because we didn't clear the floats. So we need to take care of that right now. And so we go back here, and yeah, the live preview was cancelled because, as I told you before, when you open the Google Chrome developer tools in this live window, then the connection gets lost. Now, clearing those floats, I will now show you a new class which is very used in web design and web development, and it's called the ClearFix class, and I will define it now. But don't worry about understanding exactly what I'm going to do here. we just use this class to clear the floats. And the actual clearing happens right here. So let me just complete this. So again, don't worry so much about understanding this. See, it's hidden. Okay, so what this class will do, it will clear the float after an element. So we will actually add this class here in the UL, and I will explain you why. This is because the child elements of this class, which are the li elements, are the ones who have the float property. And so we say that the parent has this clearFix class, and then that float will be cleared right after the UL element. And we do that here, and we do that here, and now that problem should be solved. So let's open up the connection again and close the old one. And here we are. So this works. Now we have our space here such as we want to. So we can confirm this. It's section meals. And now the section meals no longer has 0 pixels height, but it has its actual 546 pixels high. And everything works just right. So one last thing to do that I told you at the beginning of this lecture is to create a good way to separate between different sections. And what I want to do here is to add a very, very subtle background color to this section. So it's section steps and background color, and I will start with white. And so as I said, I want a very subtle effect here, so such as this one, and you will not notice it right now. The live connection was lost again, I don't know why. So this one is white, and this has a very subtle gray color, and you don't notice it so much now, but you will notice the difference once we design our next section, and it will have a great effect. So now we have 4 sections designed, and it's already starting to look very promising, I think. And so in the next lecture we're starting with our cities section. So feel free to review this lecture or to even ask some questions in the course forums if you have some. And then after that, see you in the next lecture. I hope you're excited for yet another lecture on our killer website project. In this lecture, we'll build the section where the user can see in which cities OmniFood works. And here is a simple way of showing exactly that. Just an image of each city with some details below them, beautifully side by side. And in this lecture, we'll practice some of our new skills. We'll also learn how to use small icons aligned with some text. This is a little trickier than the big icons we used before. And finally, we'll learn how to best style generic links, which are the normal text links you usually see on all kinds of websites. So let's start this right now. Okay, back in brackets. Now, as you are already used to, we will start a new section and name it. This one is called section cities because we're showing our cities here. And now we do the exact same thing as we did here, so I can actually copy it to save us some time. It's just a title with some text in it. And again, we will get our text from the text document. copy all of it and paste it down here with comments. So copy this and paste it here. Of course, we don't need this. So the title is already here. And now, as you remember, we have those 4 columns with the photos and the details below the photos. So what are we going to do? Maybe I will give you some time to practice this, because I hope you already know how to do this by now. So just pause this and continue to code by yourself. Alright, so I hope that you managed to write some code here, and now I will show you how I would do it. So of course we need a new row. And then some columns inside of it. So class column call, and then since we have 4 image, span 1 of 4. Alright, and now we need our text in here. So let me see what we got here. So we have the number of happy eaters, we have the number of chefs, and we have the Twitter username of OmniFood in this city. So what I will do here is to use an icon for each of those and then write the text. So an icon for the eaters, one icon for the top chefs, and one icon for the Twitter username. So let's get those icons from Ion Icons, such as we did before. And open their website, Ion Icons. It's already here. So for the first one, I will choose a user. And again, I'm going down here to the part of the iOS-like icons. And I want to choose a user. Let me see if I can find one. Okay, this looks great to me. So I'm going to copy this. And let's go back and just insert an icon right here. So the class, paste it. I hope you remember that. And that's it. And now I can just copy the text here. So 1000 happy eaters. Okay, but before moving on, I will actually add the image here to this column and the title. So it is an IMG and the source is inside of our resources and images. Well, by now you already know exactly how we should do that, right? So this is the image for Lisbon, which is our first city, and the alt can just be Lisbon. And then again we use our H3 element, such as we did in the other box up here. Do you remember? So we had these 4 boxes. It actually had the class box and then an H3 title. And I will now also reuse this class down here so that those boxes looks quite similar. So I want this column here to be a box as well. So and now you start to see that we're starting to reuse some of the classes on our website, and that's really nice because that saves us time of formatting, and at the same time it allows us to have some consistency throughout our web page. So now we have the image here and we have the title, and I guess the best idea is to put each of these icons together with the text inside a container, so a div element. And we can call them like city future. Don't need this here. Great. So we have the image, the title, and now we will have one little container for each of the three details. So we have the eaters, then we have the top chefs, and we have the Twitter username. And now let's just choose an icon for the top chefs and for the Twitter name. So back in the Ion Icons library here, let's choose a cool icon for the top chefs. Maybe a star would be a good idea. So let's see if we can find something like that. There's really a huge amount of icons here. Okay, let me copy this and then paste it right here. This is a star, and now for the Twitter username we have a couple of social icons down here, like all kinds of icons that you can imagine: Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Dribbble, Instagram, Snapchat, really everything you can imagine. And we will actually use them later, but for now we just need this Twitter icon. Alright, so let me just check how this looks like on our website. Okay, so of course the image is way too big now, and that's because we didn't format it yet, but our H3 title already looks good, and this H2 title of course is also good looking already, and the icons are showing up here. So let's continue adding the other three columns. And instead of rewriting all of it, I will just copy it 1, 2, and 3. And so the second one is San Francisco. So Lisbon, San Francisco. Let me look for the image. Lisbon, San Francisco. Oh, the last one. Now it's just a matter of changing all the stuff. So instead of, we have 3700 and 160, and here it's SF. San Francisco. So here we have 160 and SF. Yeah, that's right. So the next city is Berlin, San Francisco, and here we go, Berlin and Berlin. What do we have here? Alright, it's Berlin. And here we have 2300 and 110. And Berlin. And the last one is London. And here it is. So 1200, 50, and London. Alright, great. Don't need this. I'll actually leave the comments there. So, great. I think the markup is here. Let's check it. Great. So it's not formatted, as you can see, but the content is here, and all we need to do next is to format it. And actually, I want to show you this. Remember in the last section we defined this gray color here, and as I told you, it is a great way of separating sections from one another, and now we can see that. So you come down here and it's beautifully separated just by this color and by this white space, of course. So we have lots of white space, which gives our website visual hierarchy, and it actually looks designed with all this white space here and between the images and the title. I think it really looks great so far. And yeah, see you in the next lecture, where we will then use CSS to format this thing here. Okay, see you there. So welcome back to part 2 of building the cities section. Without further ado, let's go back to our website. And this is where we left. Now formatting this shouldn't be so hard, right? We will start with the images now. And yeah, you should probably do this on your own now. So I'll give you some time to do that. Alright. So maybe you paused the video and did it by yourself. So now let's see how I would do it. Okay, so this is a box class, and I want to select the image inside of the box. Now this could be a problem if we had other boxes with images inside of them, but as you know, the other box that we have is this image up here. Sorry, it's this box up here, and there is no image inside of this. So we can just use the selector that we're already used to. Okay. Let's add another code section here. This one is the cities. I really like some consistency here. And now box and image. And what we want here is the image to be exactly as wide as the box. So what we say is width 100%. And obviously the height will then be set automatically. And we can maybe have some margin between the box and the H3 heading. So let's just add some margin to the bottom here of maybe 15 pixels. And let's check this out. Okay, cool. This is great. And now let's add some margin to these lines here. And if you remember, each of those is a div element called city future. All right, so city future, and maybe a margin to the bottom of each of them of 5 pixels. Okay, great. And now comes the most difficult part, which is to format those icons right here. I would like to make them a little bigger and maybe aligned to each other and have an orange color. So let's try to do that. So if you remember the other icons that we used, we actually gave them a class name. As you can see here, we called them icon big. So now let's call these ones icon small. I should have done this before I started to copy, but Alright. Now I have to copy it all in all classes here, in all icons. But it doesn't take so long. So person, star, and Twitter. Great. So let's go back here to the reusable section where we have our icons. So icon small. Alright, so the first thing is to make them kind of aligned to each other. So what I will start doing is to say that I want to see these as inline blocks so that I can assign them some width, which I will say should be 30 pixels. And this way I can now say text align, and then I can center them inside of this inline block. And this should work. Now I will also want to give them this nice orange color that we used before. We'll get it here and paste it right here. And I obviously also want those icons to be a little bigger. And as you remember, this is an icon font, so I can just adjust the font size, and let's say, for instance, 120% here. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see that these icons are not quite aligned with the text, right? So what can we do about this? Let me use a nice technique, and I will say that the line height should also be on 120%, and that the vertical align should be to the middle. And maybe that solves our problem. Okay, this doesn't quite look like I would like to, because now it's the other way. They're now two way down here, right? They're still not aligned. So let me tell you another technique we can use. So there are 3 secrets essentially to align those icons. Let me write it here so you can remember it. Secrets to align text and icons. So comments are a great way to do exactly that, right? To comment or code. So we can now set another margin to the top, and this is a new thing because now we will set a negative margin. So negative margin does exactly the opposite thing than a positive margin. So a positive margin gives a space, and the negative margin is kind of takes space away. So this will pull our icons to the top 2 pixels, hopefully. Well, let's see if this works. 2 was maybe not enough. Let me use 4 pixels. And 4 pixels actually looks great. So this is nicely aligned here. And I think this looks quite good. Maybe 5 pixels would also be okay. And another thing we can do is to add some margin to the right, so we have some space between the icon and the text, right? So let me do that as well. So 5 pixels here can be better, and a margin to the right of, let's say, 10 pixels. And with this, I think we're good to go. Yeah, that's it. This looks cool, right? Now there's only one thing left to do in this section, which is to turn these Twitter usernames here into links and then format those links with CSS. So let's do that. So back here in the HTML file, let me just go here. So we want an A element for a link, right? Ref. And once again, we have nowhere to point this thing, so we just use the hash symbol. And let's do the same thing for each of the 4 cities. So Berlin is next, nowhere, and now the last one here. So what does it look like? Okay, these are just some normal links as you are used to see. So what I want to do now is to have links in the orange color, and I also want a more beautiful underlining than this one. So first of all, I will change the color and I will get rid of this underlining. And we have already done this before, so this will be not different from the last time. So I will just open a new code section here for generic links, because we will use these links in more places, maybe. So now I have to format all links at the same time, and so I just use the A, because that's for the most generic links. And I will here, such as I did the last time, specify the link and the active state. So I want the color to be orange. So orange, and I want no text underline. So it's text, decoration, none. Simple as that. And now what I want is, instead of these underline, I actually want an underline, because that's what most users are used to when they see a link. But we will do that in a more beautiful way, and that's with a border bottom. So a border at the bottom. The simple 1 pixel and solid, and also this orange. And to make it even more stand out, we'll add a padding at the bottom, 1 pixel maybe, so we have some space between the text and the border. So let's see what it looks like. I have to get rid of these blue boxes, which comes every time we select an element. Okay, this is what it looks like. Cool, right? And now one thing left to do is to say what should happen when we hover this link, right? Okay, so let's do that. And as you already know, we now say a hover and a active. And up here it's actually not active, of course, it is visited. So what we want to happen when we hover a link, we want it to become the color of the normal text, which is, if you remember from the beginning, it was like the first thing we said, color is this, gray. And we also want the border to disappear. And do you remember how we do that? So instead of saying we want it to 0 pixels, we simply make it transparent, because that's a much cleaner solution. Transparent. Oh, and again, we want this to happen with a nice transition. So like an animation. So we choose transition, border bottom, and again an interval of 0 to 2 seconds, and we also want to animate the color. So 0.2 seconds, and that should do the job. What it looks like. Okay, great. This is exactly what we wanted the links to do here, right? Now, one thing, what did we notice here, is this one. Because this is also a link, this now also have this this annoying underline, which we actually don't want. These one don't have it, and these of course not, because in this ones we specified the border specifically, which we didn't do on these images, actually on these links. So we need to fix that, and it's quite easy. We just have to go down here to the how it works section, right? And where is it? So down here we just create some code for the button app, because as you remember, this here is the class of the links, button app. So button app link and button app visited should have no border at all. So border is 0. And this should solve our problem. Yeah, so the border disappeared. Alright, so now we have 5 of our 9 sections designed. So we have already more than half of our website completely built. Alright, this is great. So next up we have a customer testimonials section, which will also be very beautiful, as you will see.